Hello people of YouTube, it's Deepak here, and welcome to DCS World 2.9.3 and RASBAM Simulations F-15E Strike Eagle. Welcome to tutorial for Air-to-Air Radar BVR modes. Today we're going to discuss the BVR modes of the AN/APG-70 radar, which is the radar fitted to the F-15E Strike Eagle, as seen here on the black radome. It's a very modern pulse Doppler look-down, shoot-down radar, which has the kind of standard modes that you'll be used to, range while scan and track while scan. However, it has many sub-modes to this radar, and it can be quite a lot to manage. In early access, not all modes are implemented as yet, so it may well be the case in the future I'll need to add addendums to this. However, all of this is working as of DCS World 2.9.3 and my filming on the 23rd of March 2024. But yes, there will be more to come in the future. Let's jump into the cockpit quickly to get rid of some of that noise, and let me talk a little bit about BVR again, as a quick reminder if you haven't watched my previous air-to-air radar videos. BVR, which is Beyond Visual Range, is one of the two main forms of air-to-air combat, with the other being WVR, or Within Visual Range. BVR is when your target is outside of the range of your eyes, you cannot visually reference them, and you have to rely on the sensors of your aircraft, primarily the radar. Although you could also be using forward-looking infrared, other types of electro-optical scan and lock systems, and all kinds of other stuff, no doubt. But today we're going to focus on the radar. The other kind of combat is WVR, or Within Visual Range, more commonly called dogfighting, and that's when you've merged with your target and you'll primarily be referencing them using your eyes. You'll kind of padlock your head to them and maneuver the aircraft for the kill. So, without any further ado, let's focus down here on the left MPD, where I'm currently displaying the air-to-air radar display. And I'll quickly show you how you get this. I'm currently in air-to-air master mode. I'll switch it to nav. And I already have this display programmed to show the air-to-air radar on the left MPD when I'm in air-to-air master mode. But if I go to main menu, you can always access it by selecting air-to-air radar at the top right here on the first of the menu pages. We of course have menu 2, menu 3, and then back to menu 1. So we choose air-to-air radar. We have here the cursor, which is these two dashed lines, and this is how we interact with the display. However, notice straight away that I can't do anything as yet. You'll note that we're missing the command bars at the bottom of the MPD. If I push the castle switch to the left long, because we're on the left MPD, you'll notice that I now have the command bars appearing at the bottom, and I can now move my radar cursor. So that's now working correctly. Note that if the backseater, if the Wizzo was currently using the air-to-air radar, it would display a legend on the screen saying that the radar was in use. If I then pressed the castle hat left long again, I would then steal the radar from my Wizzo, quite possibly causing him to swear at me. So before I proceed, let's go over the Hotas controls that we're going to need in order to interact with the radar, because there's a bunch of these. I just mentioned the castle switch, so you're going to want to map your castle switch, aft and forward, left and right. It also has a press function as well. You can think of this pretty much as the sensor select switch that you have in the F-18 or in the Harrier. It works in the same way. So pressing castle switch left, right and down will cycle those displays, short presses that is, and long presses in the direction of the display will take command of that display. So very useful, you're going to want that. The other major one you're going to want is the auto acquisition switch. It has a forward, an aft, and a depress. It's just a three, well, yeah, I guess it's momentary two position with a depress, basically. This is used for entering the auto acquisition modes, which we'll not be covering today, but it's also used to enter track while scan from a single target track, and we will absolutely be covering that. Very important, auto acquisition switch depress, or press as it is here, that is your target reject button. On many other aircraft it's going to be your nose wheel steering button. Note that in the F-15 it is auto-ac depress. That's probably the first thing that trips people up when they're trying to use the radar here. You're also going to want your TDC. I actually have mine set as a axis here, but you also need the depress. That's how you're going to enter the mini raster and the manual acquisition modes. And then you also want your coolie switch. And your coolie switch is got an up, down, and left, right on that one as well. These are the only switches that we really need for interacting with the radar. Of course, for weapons employment, there may be others. So note that I now have command over the air-to-air radar, and I can now move the cursor. Much like with other aircraft, the cursor is currently displaying the vertical extents of my scan at that location in thousands of feet. So at this position, I'm scanning between 38,000 and 2,000. If I hover over a target return, I get its current altitude as well in thousands of feet. So all of that is how the cursor works. Going over the symbology that we have in here, we have a grid as normal. We're currently in the maximum azimuth scan and 80 nautical miles. So each one of these boxes basically in the vertical is 20 nautical miles, so 20, 40, 60, and 80 nautical miles on the display. Azimuth, full azimuth across the bottom is 60 degrees left and right, and we're currently in range while scan. Range while scan has modes for 60 degrees and 30 degrees, and with regards to range, we can go all the way out to 160. So that's the basics of what we have here. Going across the bottom, this carrette, this inverse carrette that's going back and forth, is the current antenna position and azimuth. The circles are the maximum extents of the current scan, and then you have the same in elevation here. So the carrette shows the current position, and then we also have the balls showing the top and bottom of the scan based on the number of bars. Actually, that's one control that I didn't mention. If I go back to adjust controls and I go to my axis commands, I also have radar antenna elevation. You can make this a switch if you wanted to as well, but I've got it on an axis, and I also have my TDC. So note that I can use the elevation control to move the antenna. You can see it moving here. So I can get it all the way down, and then I'm basically scanning under the ground. And if I bring it all the way back up again, you can see that we're actually starting to get meaningful values. That's it back on basically on the horizon there. I'll leave it about there, and you can see that I'm scanning between 45 and 11 at that position, and much, much further out there as well. So that's how you control that. So that's the basics of the outer part of the display. Inside the display, we've got a whole bunch of symbology. This triangle here is my currently selected steer point. If there were additional steer points in the field of view, they would appear numbered. This is my bullseye symbol, and it's the currently selected bullseye. Triangles are aircraft which are basically, they have a negative closing. They're not head-on, or at least the system doesn't consider them head-on, so they are receding. Squares are neither receding or, well, they're not hot or cold, sorry, I should use the correct terminology. Upward-facing triangles are cold, downward-facing triangles are hot, and squares are neither considered hot nor cold. They're not within parameters to be considered either. You'll also notice that I have this jamming strobe here, this series of blocks, and then I also have this is telling me basically at what point the radar will burn through and I'll actually get a contact. And you can see that I am actually getting a contact down here, but this is of course an extrapolated contact and might not be hugely accurate. And I also have AOJ, which is angle on jam, displayed at the top here, letting me know that I am receiving jamming contacts. You'll also see these little triangles. These are letting me know that I have a range limited target, so the radar has picked up some targets further out. If I move my cursor all the way to the top, I can bump the range, and now I can see these targets. They were the same ones that were receding before. So that's a kind of basic overview of the symbology inside the display. We also have up here, we have the bearing and range to the cursor, the current cursor position. And then down here, we have bearing and range of the cursor position to bullseye. So you can see that I can get it very, very close to bullseye, and then I pull it away, I get a bearing and a range from the bullseye location. Bottom left is my ground speed, bottom right is my true airspeed, and top right is my current altitude, if I recall correctly. No, that can't be correct, because I'm actually at 20,000. Oh, sorry, that's the range. Deary me. Deary me. Okay, that's the current range being displayed. Cool, so let's go around the controls around the outside. If we take the top, we have selection of channel. This is actually simulated and important in the F-15. You're going to want to make sure that you're not on the same radar channel as your wingmen and other friendly F-15s, otherwise you'll generate interference for each other. There are channels labelled Alpha to Echo for main channels, and then there are modes within those channels to avoid interference. So they're numbered up to 8. So what you're probably going to do is take a channel for a flight, and then number 1 will be on the kind of anti-interference mode 1, and then 2 will be on 2, 3 will be on 3, 4 will be on 4, and so on. And that will make sure that you don't interfere with each other. We also have anti-jamming modes, but these are not currently implemented. So anti-jamming modes can be selected. There are 3 of them, E1, E2, and E3. I don't know what these do exactly, other than they should make it possible for you to reject jamming more effectively. But these are not implemented at the current time, so it doesn't matter. You have core, which is also not implemented at the current time. You have EL, which is your current bar scan. This is how many vertical slices, or slices of altitude your radar is currently taking. We're currently in a 6-bar scan. In range while search, we can go all the way up to an 8-bar scan, as denoted here. Of course, the more of these bars we add, the longer our scan time is going to take. You can see the current bar being scanned at the bottom left, and the current PRF being employed. We're currently in high only on the PRF. If I dump this down to 1, then we only have 1. We get much faster returns, but we're only going to pick up targets around about our altitude. We then have frame store. This is basically how many blobs to display per target. A frame is the complete set of bar scans that you're going to currently do. Let's actually increase that because we're on 1, so it doesn't make any sense. A single frame will be the time it takes for me to scan all 4 of the bars. If I drop this all the way down to 0, what it's going to do is it's only ever going to display the brick for the current bar in which it was detected. So normally you're going to want that on at least 1. In some cases you can have it on 2, and then you're going to get a little bit of historical information. You'll start to see more history on your radar returns on the display. But the default is 1. The next one you have is the Gmtr mode. Gmtr is ground moving target rejection. This is a mechanism that the radar uses to avoid false returns from the ground. It's basically a speed gate that it applies to targets that it picks up. You have settings for low, medium, high, and chaff. We're currently on medium. Low mode is 45 knots. So targets below 45 knots will be rejected by the radar. Medium, which is what we're on now, is 65. We can bump it to high, which is 87 knots, and then the last setting is chaff, and that puts it at 95 knots. This makes it less likely that the radar will display chaff bundles. I would probably leave this on high most of the time. It's fairly unlikely that you're going to be engaging a target that's travelling at less than 87 knots, unless you're dealing with helicopters, in which case you're going to want to dump this to low. But note that especially if I reduce the antenna elevation, we're going to start to get a lot more nonsense appearing on the display. Much more likely that you're going to get ground returns and or other funny artifacts. So let's put that back to high. SL is also not implemented. Next we have the current PRF. We're currently in high. Now there are 3 different kind of master modes for the PRF, but normal PRFs can be high, medium, or interleaved. Note that in interleaved mode it will do a high, then a medium, a high, then a medium, a high, then a medium. So you're not necessarily doing both PRFs on any given bar. However, you then have RGH, which is range gated high. If we switch to this mode, it will then actually do each PRF on each bar. So with interleaved, you're going to do, bar 1 is high, bar 2 is medium, bar 3 is high. If I go to RGH, we're going to do 2 scans per bar with both PRFs. So it's actually going to take a lot longer. However, that can be useful under certain circumstances. You then have vector mode, and in vector scan mode, you might see it here, the antenna moves at half normal speed. This is quite useful for detecting very small objects, such as cruise missiles, at longer ranges. It doesn't have much of an application against most types of aircraft, though. Unless, possibly, certain types of stealth coatings, this might make it more likely for you to pick up a stealth aircraft, maybe? I think most of the time, you're probably, for this kind of engagement where we're expecting enemy aircraft to be head-on, you're going to want it on high, generally. But yeah, you have the other options for picking up other aircraft types. We then have Enter Mode. This allows us to pre-program a bunch of air-to-air missile settings, currently not implemented. Main menu button here, and the recorder, which is also not implemented at this time. Other controls that we have outside of the radar display itself, we have the actual radar mode switch down here as positions for off, standby, on, and emergency. If you do a cold start, note that you're going to generally want to put the radar into standby, and it will then go through a 3-minute warm-up. During that time, the radar is not usable. If you move the switch all the way to on immediately, it will still do the 3-minute warm-up, and then it will start emitting as long as there's no weight on wheels. The system has an interlock. Whenever there's weight on the wheels, the radar does not emit. Emergency mode disengages all kind of interlocks and safety features except for weight on wheels. So this basically puts you straight into a war mode without any of the controls that you would normally have in training. You're not allowed to use emergency mode when you're in training. Another switch that we have over here is non-cooperative target recognition enable. You can switch this into on, and then the system will attempt to do NCTR on an STT target. This is when it tries to identify the target based on its radar returns. Most notably, it tries to get returns from the fan blades and other engine components, and from that it can normally identify a target. Well, normally. It can sometimes identify a target. And another thing that you're going to want to do is make sure your IFF is set up. This is the master kind of mode. This is actually our transponder, so this is the codes that we're sending. You're always going to want this in mode A and normal. And then for our interrogator, the settings are all on the UFC on the right-hand side here. The F-15 is actually fitted with 2 interrogators. So if we press this menu entry here, we have the AAI and we have the EID. I forget exactly what these stand for, but it doesn't really matter. For game purposes, these effectively do the same thing. You're always going to want to make sure that Mode 4 is enabled, so that you're doing Mode 4 interrogations. You also have the option, and this is only really useful in multiplayer or in specially crafted scenarios, but you also have the option to do Modes 1, 2, and 3 interrogations, with or without codes, I might add as well. We'll not cover that really today. The only thing I would make sure is that Mode 4 is enabled, and then I would also turn on the Auto ID for PDT. And that basically means that whenever you have something as your primary designated target, it's going to be continuously doing IFF against that and getting returns. I think that's a very useful thing to be in. And then we can hit menu to go back to the main menu there. Okay, I'm going to reset the scenario, and then we'll start going through range while scan and how it's implemented. Okay, I've reset the scenario and we're back in the cockpit, and we're currently in range while search, otherwise just known as search mode actually in the F-15. So in search mode, we're not like building track files or doing anything particularly complicated. We are just doing basic search. This is one of the modes that has the longest range and is going to pick up targets most easily. You can see that these are all upwards facing triangles now, so these are all cold targets that I'm currently getting, and I'm actually going to reduce the bars because we're not going to need nearly that many. That will give us more rapid returns. And something else I'm going to do is, because I reset, we actually don't have the interrogator on again. Let's set the interrogator up properly and go back to here, and I will also turn back on NCTR enable. I think there is supposed to be a way to manually trigger NCTR, but I don't believe it's implemented as yet, so you have to rely on the auto NCTR. So, controls when we're in search mode. We can azimuth bump by moving the cursor off the left or right hand side. You can see that I now have the 30 bar scan and I can center it using the cursor. So that's that. That gives me an even faster kind of return rate. I can then range bump as well by moving the cursor all the way up or all the way down. Note, as before, if there are targets off the top of the screen, we're going to get range limited target indications at the top there. I can move my cursor over targets and I'm going to get range information there. And then if I do a long press on my TDC, more than a second, and release, we're going to enter a single target track. So that was effective. Let me just pause there because, of course, we've had a symbology change now. So note that at the bottom left, we get a little histogram of the IFF interrogation responses that we've received from this target. You'll get pluses and minuses. In this case, we got a negative mode 4 alpha response. So based on IFF, we have kind of what the system calls low confidence that this is a friendly. We can't, of course, absolutely say that this is an enemy. We would need to do some other stuff, maybe talk to AWACS, look at the data link, visually inspect the target. But this target is definitely suspicious. This is currently our PDT, which is primary designated target, and so we have all kinds of steering cues for this target now as well. I'm not going to cover those today, but we get a bunch of information. We can also see at the top we have an indication HOJ, which means home on jam. That's telling us that this target, the moment we locked it up, it actually turned on its jammer, and so we now have a home on jam target. So indications may become erratic. That's what it's warning us. Number above the target lets us know that the target is at Angels 20, and in fact that's repeated on the left-hand side here as well. We then also have closure rate appearing on the right-hand side, and then we have range indications for the currently selected weapon. Again, we're not going to cover that today. I can move my cursor off of the target if I would like, and that information continues to update at the top left where my cursor currently is. And if I want to drop this target, I can press Auto Acquisition Depress, and that does a return to search. And the radar is now back in normal search or range while search mode. I'm now going to take one of the targets from this further away group, and I'm going to do a long press and release of the TDC. I've now locked this one up, and you can see that I'm getting positive response on 4 alpha. So this aircraft is confirmed friendly, and we should not engage it. And you can also see at the top left, it's repeated that with a circle. Circles in IFF mean that we have high confidence that this is a friendly. So that's something that you need to watch out for. This is definitely something that we don't want to be engaging. HOJ, by the way, is again warning us that there are jamming contacts within the field of view of the radar, so they're probably impacting how good the information we're getting is. Again, I'm going to press Auto Acquisition Depress, and we've now dropped that target. So you can see they're appearing as squares. As before, that means that the closure rate is very, very low. These are appearing as upward-facing triangles. That means that the closure rate is negative. If I come out of active pause, I'm actually going to go full afterburner, and let's see if we can turn these into closing targets or hot targets. While we're doing that, I'll show you how to do a full IFF scan. If I press Coolie Switch Left Long, you want to look at the bottom left of the screen. You'll see I've got AAI mode 4, and I got circles, and I got nothing for these ones down here. So let's do that one more time, and I'll actually pause it this time as I'm doing it. Paused. Okay, so you'll notice that I'm doing air-to-air interrogation mode 4 alpha. You'll see that we actually got 2 circles here, but they're non-filled circles. Now what this is telling us is that these are non-correlated high confidence IFF returns. So these are definitely friendly, and if the radar was actually getting returns from them at the current time, they would be filled circles, because then they would be correlated. These are empty circles because they are non-correlated. You'll note that these symbols down here did not change. They are still cold targets. They're still triangles facing away. That means that we got no response whatsoever from these aircraft. I'm going to continue accelerating and just see if I can get these to turn into closing targets. I don't know if I can actually get myself fast enough where that will happen. The system is still considering these to be cold. So that's fair enough. Also, we're getting closer and closer on this jamming target, so I would suspect that at some stage soon, we may actually burn through and get a return from it. And you'll see what that looks like. But yeah, the jamming status up here is currently showing angle on jam, so that's letting us know that we only have bearing information for this contact. We don't know the range that it's at or any other information. Let's continue inbound and see what we get. Yep, there we go. We picked up our friendlies again. They're showing us the range-limited targets up at the top. We're going pretty fast now. I'm approaching 800 knots, and there we go. And now we actually have a hot target. You can see this one is showing as a little facing triangle. I'm going to do a long press on the TDC, see if I lock him. I've locked a jamming target. Now, let's just pause quickly. He's showing the star, which is the standard primary designated target symbol. You can see he has a velocity line, so that shows you his heading and his kind of relative speed. We have a closure rate on the side, which is over 1,000 knots, and we have his altitude here as well. But we're also getting the indication jam. Now, this is the indication that we get when we've actually burned through jamming. So we have a lock on this target in STT, but he is jamming, which means that from time to time we could get inaccuracies in these returns. But otherwise, we have him locked. We could actually engage at this time. Those are the basics of range while search. I'm going to reset now and we'll dive into TWS. Okay, I've reset the simulation and you rejoin me in the cockpit of the F-15E, and I can now demonstrate for you the different TWS modes that you have available to you. I currently have the radar in search mode. This is the default RWS mode. Actually, let's azimuth bump here and just get the 30 degrees mode. And there are two different ways that you can enter TWS. One of them is called designated TWS, where you already have a single target track. The other one is non-designated TWS, where you don't have an STT and you simply directly enter one of the TWS modes. Now, there are multiple TWS modes, but they're roughly broken into two groups. You have the different search pattern modes, which are wide, medium, and narrow. These are scans beginning at 2 bar 60 degrees for wide, 4 bar 30 degrees for medium, and 6 bar 15 degrees for narrow. And then you have the two high data rate modes, which are 3 bars and 30 degrees for the 3 bar high data, and 2 bars and 30 degrees for the 2 bar high data. Let's first demonstrate entering this from a single target track. And to do that, I'll demonstrate something that I've not shown you yet, called mini raster. I've demonstrated entering STT by long pressing the TDC on a radar return. If I do a short press on TDC, I enter what's called mini raster, and it does a very, very narrow scan at the location of the cursor. If I then move the cursor over one of these targets, it will immediately lock that target. Basically, it will lock the first thing that falls under the cursor. So I now have a lock here. I'm in single target track, although as you can see at the top, it's home on jam. From here, I can enter one of the TDC modes using, TWS modes, by using the auto acquisition switch. I'm going to choose to go into wide mode, which is auto acquisition switch aft. So I've done that now. So that's wide pattern mode, that's 2 bars and 60 degrees, and you can see confirmed here 2 TWS H. The H is actually the current PRF, so we're in high PRF. And you can see that I have a PDT, which I'm actually in the process of losing. I could depress TDC on any one of these just now and make it my PDT. And I could also azimuth bump to get into the medium pattern mode. This is wide pattern. So let's azimuth bump, and I'm now in 4 TWSH. That is the medium pattern, 4 bars and 30 degrees. From here, I could go into the narrow mode, but to do that, I have to move my cursor over the legend down here and depress, and I get narrow. And of course, narrow mode is 6 bars and 15 degrees. This is a mode that you're very rarely going to use. It's only going to be if you have a lot of vertical separation. If I azimuth bump that again, I come back out. That's actually the only way of getting out of that mode. I'm now in the 4 bar. If I azimuth bump again, I'm back to the 2 bar. So this is the mode that I started off with. Note that when you're in TWS, the system can generate 10 track files, so it can basically track 10 targets, and then you can also observe an additional 20 targets. The tracked targets will show as full intensity symbols, and the observation targets will show as these half intensity symbols that you can see here just now with some of them. Again, I can just depress to get a PDT. I'm actually losing all of these. They're all acting very defensively, you see, when I lock them up. They're trying to notch me. Let's see if I can actually get one of these. Okay, I now have a PDT. Next thing that I can do is if I press Coolie switch up, I can actually cycle through my targets. This would be a really good way of launching a bunch of AMRAAMs at targets. So yeah, Coolie switch up short, that will cycle targets. And then again, if I go auto acquisition switch depress, I'm back to search. That gives me my return to search mode. Let's do a non-designated TWS switch, and again I'm going to put myself into the wide pattern, which is the aft on the auto-act switch. So if I tap the TDC, and before I get a lock just go auto-act aft, I'm now immediately in TWS with no currently designated target, and it's put me into the wide mode straight away. From here, again, I can azimuth bump to get the 4 bar, or I can depress on the legend here to get the narrow. Alternatively, I can press forward on the auto-act switch, and I will go straight to the high data rate modes. So this has taken me to the 3 bar high data rate, which is 3 bars 30 degrees. If I press forward on the auto-act switch again, it will return me to my wide search. This is actually medium search that I'm on just now. If I go auto-act again, I'm back to high data rate. If I go auto-act up long, I will actually jump to the 2 bar high data rate scan. And that's actually all of the modes. So we have 2 bar high data rate, long press of auto-act up will give me the 3 bar. If I do just a short press of auto-act up, I'm actually in the 4 bar, which is the medium pattern. I can azimuth bump to get to the wide, which is the 2 bar, and I can depress my TDC on the legend to get narrow, and I can leave narrow by azimuth bumping again. Other things that I can do with the Coolie switch, by the way, as I already showed before, a long press left will do an interrogation using the AAI. We actually have 2 interrogators though. If I do a long press right on the Coolie switch, I do an interrogation with the EID, which is the other interrogator. I could theoretically set these interrogators up with different settings via the UFC. And then lastly, if I have a single target track, I'm going to return to search, try and find a stable target to STT, and if I do Coolie switch right short, I'll do an NCTR, and you can see here it's showing unknown. I was wrong before when I said there's no manual NCTR, there actually is. It's in fact the auto NCTR that's not implemented yet. So let's do another one of these. I'll see if I can find one. I'm actually going to go back into TWS, see if there's somebody flying either towards or away, and if there is, I'll try and actually get an NCTR on them. We do have returns over here. Yeah, he is actually flanking. That's not perfect. Let's do a short press on NCTR. We get an unknown. Yeah. Coolie up, I'll get the other guy. Short press, unknown. Yeah. That's not uncommon. You do need to be looking right down the intakes or the exhaust for the NCTR to work. Here's one that claims to be coming towards me. Also unknown. Well, there you go. That's the best that we could hope for. So that's the different TWS modes there. Again, depressing the auto-act switch will take me back to search, which is your range while search. So, quick summary. We have the RWS, which is the default search mode, as I've demonstrated here, and it has the 30 degrees and the 60 degrees modes. We have the mini raster, which just a depress of the TDC will get us. And I guess I could depress auto-act to get back out of that again. I can depress my TDC and then go add direction on the auto-act switch, and that will give me TWS. And then I can, of course, bump through these different modes. High data rate, auto-act switch up to go to the pattern modes. Long press of the auto-act up will take me back to high data rate. And when I'm in the pattern modes, of course, I can actually azimuth bump to go between the wide and medium patterns, with the depress taking me to the narrow. And those are basically all the modes that we have available to us at present in the air-to-air radar of the F-15E Strike Eagle. Okay, thank you very much for watching, everybody. I hope you all enjoyed that. If you haven't already, please subscribe, like, and comment. It's a really big help to me and to the channel. You also have the option of further supporting the channel by joining Deephack's Ground Crew. Thank you very much to those of you who've already done so. It's a small monthly fee, approximately the same as the cost of a cup of coffee, and it really helps me in creating this content. The names of those who are already in the Ground Crew are on screen now. You've got some small benefits in that we have a Discord server that we share together, and we also occasionally fly together from time to time. So thank you all very much for watching. Fly safe, and I'll see you all next time.